Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third and final installment of our micro series for NICU professionals. My name is Diana Marrero, and I am a family support specialist here at Hand to Hold. This three-part series was created to help equip NICU professionals like yourself with the tools you need to support the families in your care with empathy, resilience, and confidence. Each installment of this series is worth one continuing education credit for NICU nurses. We'll share a link to the survey at the end of the presentation. For those new to Hand to Hold, we are a national nonprofit 501c3 that is dedicated to providing early intervention mental health support before, during, and after a NICU stay, ensuring that all NICU families thrive. Support is provided in English and Spanish at no cost to families. Today, we are so excited to share this third and final installment in the series, Holding the Whole, Trauma-Informed Care in the NICU. NICU care is more than medicine. It's relationships, resilience, and healing. In this powerful presentation, our speaker, Mary Coughlin, shares how trauma-informed care can transform how we support fragile babies, grieving parents, and burned out professionals. I am so excited to introduce our speaker, Mary Coughlin. Mary Coughlin is a pioneering force in trauma-informed developmental care, a movement that is redefining neonatal health care by putting humanity back at the heart of practice. For over 35 years, Mary has stood on the front lines of neonatal nursing, witnessing both the miracles and the failures of a system that too often overlooks the profound impact of trauma. In Mary's presentation today, Holding the Whole, Trauma-Informed Care in the NICU, Mary invites clinicians, leaders, and caregivers to reimagine what it means to provide truly informed care, care that both honors the science of early life adversity and the soul of human connection. Welcome, Mary, and thank you for being here.
I'm so honored and excited to be part of this really important educational series. Let me just go grab my slides and we can get started. All right, cool beans, here we go. So holding the hold. This idea of trauma-informed care, although it was new to me about maybe 12 years ago, has a well-established history within the structure of behavioral health. But as you all know, right, in healthcare, we're so great at silos. And so what, may be a traditional standard of care in one silo may be completely unknown in another. And that's what happened to me when I came across this idea of trauma-informed care, which seems so profoundly relevant for the newborn intensive care unit, not just for the babies, but also for the families as well as the clinicians. Here are my disclosures. I am the president and founder of Caring Essentials Collaborative, which is an organization committed to educating and transforming the culture of care in NICUs and beyond. And I'm also a member of the Executive Council of the Family Centered Care Task Force. Here are my learning intentions. I'm hoping at the end that you'll have a better understanding about the neurobiological and relational impacts of early life adversity, specifically experienced in the newborn ICU. I'm going to introduce you to the principles of trauma-informed developmental care and challenge you to really examine how they apply to your clinical practice, not just from a performance perspective, but from an ethical and moral imperative as well. And then I'm going to introduce to you what I kind of refer to as the operational strategy behind trauma-informed developmental care. A lot of the colleagues that I've been able to share this information with often will say, gee whiz, Mary, we're already, juggling, a million plates, and now you want me to be trauma-informed. Holy moly, how am I going to add that onto my plate? The cool thing about what I'm going to share with you today, and I say that it's cool, it doesn't mean that you don't need to practice it, but you don't need to do anything more. Being trauma-informed is all about how you show up. It is literally a being activity. And so with practice, you can actually begin to integrate how you show up in more intentional ways, consistently and reliably. And these ways of showing up actually have measurable impact in mitigating and managing the trauma experience of babies and families, while also filling up your cup with joy, knowing that you are easing the suffering of those that you're called to serve. I thought this was a really cool and profound quote that I wanted to share with you guys. To care for the most vulnerable is to hold their whole story. Traditionally, in healthcare, we usually ask, what's wrong with you? So my background is a neonatal nurse practitioner, and that was a big part of taking my history. What happened to the mom? What was wrong with the mom that brought her to, the labor and delivery suite and resulted in the premature or critical ill birth of her baby. In the world of trauma-informed care, it's really about shifting the lens. It's no longer saying what's wrong with you, but it's really about what happened to you. And the body of research that supports the relevance of this approach to care continues to grow and expand. And what's wicked exciting, I think, for us in neonatology is that more and more researchers are addressing this phenomenon within our niche of pediatric care. And so when you start wondering about how to gain support to adopt this paradigm, there's a lot of evolving evidence that can really help you begin to transform the culture of care in your setting. So I figured I'd start with the biology, and I have to be really cautious about the biology because, again, I'm an ICU chick, and I get really jazzed up about the pathophysiology and the biology of the human body and how the human body responds to different situations. And so we'll start with the brain because I know all of my colleagues, right? I mean, we want to protect the brain. We talk about neurodevelopmental care. We talk about neuroprotective care. Well, what does that actually mean within the context of how the brain develops and grows? We know from science that the brain grows from the bottom up and the inside out. And there's profound relevance for that sequence of evolutionary events. So here you see I've got this image on the screen of a brain looking at the bottom, the brainstem, the middle, which I'm going to call the limbic system or the subcortex, and then the neocortex is the last piece to develop. And we get very protective about the neocortex, which obviously is a wicked important part of the brain and helps us really navigate life as, as growing adults and being successful and academics and all of the things. But sometimes I think because of our focus on that, we downplay the relevance of the subcortical structures. At the very base of the brainstem is all about determining, am I safe? And I'll refer you to the work of Stephen Porges and his polyvagal theory and many other scientists who've really looked at how autonomic nervous system regulation plays out in how we navigate life and how we navigate all of the experiences of our life. So that am I safe piece is mediated by our autonomic nervous system. And there's actually this phenomenon called neuroception that represents the continuous subconscious or unconscious phenomenon of us continuously surveying the environment for safety or threat. To be honest, coming on this webinar, I was a little bit nervous and wondering, I hope, all the tech stuff works okay. So I had that unconscious, and there was a little bit of a conscious component to that as well, about I hope everything goes okay, right? So now here I am, I'm talking to you guys, the tech is all working, I'm feeling in my groove, so I feel safe. Once I feel safe, the next part, and this happens really fast, I'm talking really slow, but this happens really fast, is am I loved? Do I feel welcome in this space? Feeling welcome in a space is contingent on safety, right? I mean, if I don't feel welcome, I don't feel safe. And as I describe these phenomena, I want you to start to think about them within the context of your own life and the work that we do. Once I feel safe, once I feel loved, then my neocortex is lit up like a Christmas tree, and I'm just going to share all the stuff that's in my brain all over you guys. And I'm, and receptive to any questions and comments that you might have, right? So what does this look like in a clinical setting? I'm going to give you two examples, one for a baby and one for a parent. So for the baby, I want you to think about the feeding experience. Now, I'm a we'll call me a seasoned or maybe a vintage NICU nurse. But in the day, I was one of those nurses that could literally, and this might not sound very respectful, I don't use this term anymore, but in the day, I could feed a stone. I could easily empty 30 mLs of milk or formula into the head of a sleeping baby. It's not that I was a barbarian or an evil person. It was basically, the focus of the day was getting this baby home. And I knew if this baby took his or her bottles over the next few days, he could go home. And that made me really happy. That made the family happy. So I'm on duty and I'm, screwing this milk into the baby, not understanding what is the baby's experience of this. And as I'm screwing that milk into the baby and the milk is leaking out the side of the mouth and the baby, maybe their eyebrows are starting to meet up to their hairline and stuff like that. And I'm not really paying attention to these stress cues because I'm on a mission to empty the milk into the baby's body. What's happening on the baby's side is that because of their immaturity, maybe their dysmaturity, maybe their severity of illness, they're able to protect their airway to a certain point. But I'm overriding that because I'm on a mission to empty the milk. So they're feeling very unsafe. As a consequence of feeling very unsafe, they're doing the different things that they can do to decrease the bolus of milk that's trying to choke them in the moment. And so they're, letting the milk leak out the sides. They're trying to send behavioral cues. Unfortunately, these little people are pre-verbal. They can't tell me, hey, stop, you're drowning me. And so over time, what happens to this baby, right? They don't feel loved. They feel continuously on alert because anybody could stick something in their mouth at any time, and that could mean death for them. And so once they become volitional eaters, right, these are the people that stop eating. They say, no, you know what, enough of that. You've been trying to kill me for the past 2 years, 3 years. We're not going to have any of that. And then we see that consequence. Remember Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When an experience is repeated and repeated and repeated and experienced as unsafe, the brain adapts and wires itself to figure out different strategies to protect itself or him or herself from these external events. So that's what's happening over here, okay, for an example of the safety with relate and how this brain imagery works for the baby. Let's talk about the parents. So again, I'll give you one of my own clinical experiences. I worked night shifts for 1,000,000 years, and parents would come in as my shift would start, and I'd introduce myself to them, give them the whole spiel about the baby, and we did primary nursing back then. So I'd get to see these parents over the sequence of days that I would be working the shift. And what I found was maybe by day 3, they're still asking me the same questions and I'm telling them the same stuff. And literally I'm starting to wonder, is there something wrong with these guys? I'm telling them all this detail, but they don't seem to retain it. Maybe they have a learning deficit. Maybe there's a language barrier here that I'm unfamiliar with. What I was actually watching, I didn't realize this at the time, but now when I look back, they were overwhelmed. They were traumatized. They did not feel safe. They're seeing their tiny little baby, who I may think, oh, this is fine. This is normal appearance for a baby at X gestational age in a newborn ICU. This is my work. I do this every day. But to a normal human being, this is completely abnormal. They come in, they're overwhelmed, they're hearing the alarms, they're hearing the beeps, they're worried about their baby, and they see this woman just, words falling out of their mouth. They don't feel safe. They don't feel seen or loved. And so their cortex, their thinking part of their brain is offline. Even though words are flying out of my mouth, it doesn't mean that it's being received on the other side. And so it's just really important for us to get really basic about how we communicate and really get clear on our understanding about how the stress response, and specifically toxic stress is that stress that overwhelms our ability to adapt and cope, can really interfere with the natural progression of either growth and development in developing human beings or our relations and reciprocity that we can have with the adults that we're also caring for as they journey through the NICU. This is also, partner to partner in collegial relationships. Sometimes we show up and we might have some stuff going on at home and we're overwhelmed and we're distracted, and it may really impede our ability to be fully present. But we don't really generally take stock in all of these elements in our world because healthcare systems, and to be honest, society at large is very hierarchical, very task-oriented, leave your personal stuff at the door, all of these kinds of phenomena that may sound fine on the surface, but when you really dive in, can really impair our ability to show up fully with intention and with compassion for those that we are caring for. There's a huge additional body of research that I had to be cautious about not putting up too many bio slides, but I'm going to touch upon a little bit of additional elements of human development that are impacted. There's a huge body of research that now helps us understand the epigenetic sequelae of exposure to early life adversity, particularly in the NICU, an amazing research team out of Northern Italy that has even identified different epigenetic phenomena that are impacted by this early life stress and trauma that has mental health and adult morbidity consequences down the road. These phenomena, these experiences include, probably it's important to know, the number one traumatic experience endured by all newborn mammals across all species is maternal separation. Well, there you go, coming right out of the gate. Welcome to the NICU. You are now separated from your mom. And depending on the cultures in different NICUs, that separation may go on for a very protracted period of time. We are now seeing some of the research that is helping us better understand the consequences of that protracted period of separation and how it really dysregulates not only the autonomic nervous system, epigenetic phenomena, but it can even deplete energy stores. There's some really good emerging, interesting research looking at mitochondrial allostatic load. And who thinks about the mitochondria every day of the week? Certainly not me. But again, as I share this, I hope the message is that there are systemic, overwhelming biological consequences related to this unmanaged or unaddressed or even unrecognized traumatic experience of the babies and the families. What was I just going to say? I do want to just have a little cautionary note here. I'm not trying to say that all stress is bad. Stress helps us adapt and grow. Our job is to determine, is this stress good stress? Is it promoting growth? Is it promoting stretch? Is the individual supported as they navigate it? Or is it completely toxic and completely overwhelming the individual? We see behavioral responses, kind of the traditional stress cues that we observe in newborns, the stop sign, the extension of the extremities. We can see some cyanosis. We can see changes in respiratory pattern. We can see vomiting. We can see a variety of different behaviors, but one of the behaviors that is relatively new for me to better understand as a response to trauma, particularly in preverbal patient populations, is dissociation. Oftentimes, I would assume that the baby is asleep. Their eyes are closed, they're not responding to me, and I'm thinking, yay, I can just move through and get my cares done. What I now understand that behavioral response to be is that fainting piece. And then, over time it evolves into a dissociative pattern where the external world is too much for me. I can't cope. I'm just going to go within. And they dissociate from their lived experience. Sometimes you can see this manifest in different ways, cardiovascular ways with, sustained tachycardia, and folks just kind of say, oh no, that's just their baseline heart rate. Get curious about this. Don't dismiss these phenomena, and particularly now with this really solid foundation of understanding trauma in the preterm and the critically ill patient population. I'm going to challenge you to get more curious and intentional about how you respond to these behavioral and physiological cues that indicate that the individual is indeed traumatized. And so what do you do? What do you do about all this stuff, Mary? How do we fix this? I mean, the fact of the matter is that when you are admitted into the newborn intensive care unit, it's traumatic. There's a lot of is around it, right? I can't help the fact or change the fact that you have maybe multiple morbidities going on, that if we weren't here, you would die, kind of a thing. So we can't take away all of the trauma. So what our goal is to mitigate it. It's to manage it. And to remind ourselves that we have neurochemical processes and systems that can actually help us really make a big difference in somebody's trauma experience. How many folks here in this webinar like to be hugged? How many folks like to be, receive a massage? When you have that tactile input, when you have that proximity of another caring human being, it actually activates your oxytocin response system. Oxytocin is the antithetical hormone to cortisol, and cortisol is, the starring role in your stress response. And so we can actually mitigate trauma through the relationships that we have. But again, I want you to kind of use yourself as kind of a touchstone. You know when somebody's faking it, and you know when somebody means it. Those hugs that you get that's like, okay, and you want to do something nice, and you just feel like this is the thing to do. And the recipient, you know when it's not real, and you know when it's real. So these little fake jobs, they don't activate your oxytocin system, and it can actually increase your cortisol. It's those real authentic touches, not just hugs, not just massages, but even just that gentle hands-on for the baby, or maybe that reassuring hand on the shoulder of a parent or a colleague. Or maybe it's just even being within the physical space of that individual that is feeling overwhelmed, that can actually be reassuring by helping them feel seen. Just to back up a little bit on that brain slide, there's this really smart guy, Bruce Perry, who's a world-renowned child psychologist, psychiatrist, and he has this, it's called the neurosequential model, and it goes along with the brain. Let me see if I can go backwards on the slide. Let's see. No. Yes. So it's about regulate. So regulate their autonomic nervous system, that level of the brainstem. Relate to them. Relating to somebody helps them feel seen, helps them feel like they're not enduring this overwhelm, this suffering all alone. And that is a calming thing. Remember that saying, a load shared is a load halved. And then when I feel that sense of safety or regulation, and I feel like we're having a relationship here, I feel seen, then it helps me calm down my dysregulated nervous system. And so I can have a conversation. We can actually problem solve. And it's the same thing with the baby. We use this language around relating to the baby called attunement. And in order to attune to the baby, and we can attune to grown-ups as well, right? It's really about reading the room, right? Calming yourself, and then seeing what is necessary in the moment. And what's interesting in the research is when you're able to do this, these excerpts here are taken from the work of Welsh and Ludwig in the work around the calming cycle. You can really kind of regulate that emotional disturbance by being present, by being truly present, not distracted, but full on present. When we're dysregulated, that's the image here that you see on the left-hand side of your screen, that your brain is all amped up. It's not feeling safe. It's not feeling seen. It's dumping cortisol and a myriad of catecholamines and inflammatory mediators into the system. And your vagus nerve is really kind of like reading the biology, and then sending messages to all the other parts of the body. Okay, we need to breathe a little bit faster because we might have to run the heck out of here because we're not feeling safe at all. And when you approach someone else like that, I want you to think about real life experiences for yourself, right? If you bump into somebody who's all dysregulated, you can feel it physiologically, right? And sometimes if you're unable to co-regulate with them, you might have to leave the room because you can feel your own body getting all amped up. And babies are just such amazing, pure creatures of emotion and innocence. And so when we show up dysregulated, agitated, all activated, we can actually convey that energetic physiology to the baby. And similarly, the image on the right. So this is when you have that co-regulation, and you could maybe, for example, take the baby who's got the red brain and the red GI tract there and present them with an adult who has the blue colorations, that calming state. And you can actually watch the baby regulate through your presence. A little bit of a sidebar. So one of my grandkids, little Joey, he was a barnacle on my daughter's hip. Barnacles, those things that stick on boats and they're like a Dickens to get off. That was what he was like with him for his first year of life. He just did not want to be away from his mama. And they lived with me. They lived on the third floor. And so I was, a part of that co-parenting, team. And yet every time his mama left, he would just, just fall apart at the seams. And I would do my co-regulation. It took longer for me to co-regulate him than it did his mama. Over time, I was able to calm him, but he would always have that transitional dysregulation phenomena. And then the minute he saw his mom, boom. Those are the experiences that I'm talking about. And for you guys that are listening to this, I mean, I just want you to kind of connect with the shared humanity here, right? Did everybody start out life as a baby? If the answer is yes, then this stuff applies to you. This isn't just about those that we care for. This is about ourselves and each other. And that, I think, is the other piece that has been an evolutionary discovery for me, is realizing, although I started out thinking about, oh, this is how we can care for others, this is really how we care for ourselves so that we bring the best version of ourselves to the service of others. And that's really what I think trauma-informed developmental care is all about. It's integrating what we already know about developmentally supportive care, which has been around for decades, right? I mean, I think I saw the first paper from Heideley Sals in the early 80s. And so we have a strong foundation of understanding those developmentally supportive needs of babies across the planet, and even heightened, if you will indulge me, for those babies that find themselves in an intensive care environment, because it isn't, just fluff and stuff that's happening, but like seriously intense stuff is happening. So they need that presence, that comfort, that reassurance even more. Because of all of the things that are happening to us. We need to have that awareness of what is trauma. And you'll see a couple of different definitions of what trauma is. The Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration of the United States is kind of like the boss, if you will, of trauma. And they basically describe trauma as an event, a series of events, or a set of circumstances that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope. That, I think sometimes when we say trauma, we think it's a motor vehicle accident, it's a gunshot wound, it's a surgical situation. And yes, those are traumatic too, but the common denominator is that they are experiences that overwhelm an individual's ability to cope. They can be physical, they can be psychological, they can be spiritual, they can be all of the three or any combination. And that, we need to be aware of the cultural and contextual milieu that surrounds these experiences. So here I am, I'm a relatively, middle-class chick here who's, had a somewhat, privileged life. I can't assume that everybody's lived experience is just like mine. I have to have cultural and contextual humility. I can draw upon my wisdom of my own lived experiences, but that doesn't mean it's like, what do you call it? Cut and paste, I draw upon that understanding of how these situations felt to me. And then I use that to say, this must be really tough for you. And this might sound like a silly step, but what it does is it actually disarms me. It opens up my heart so that I can show up more human and professional at the same time. That this idea of trauma-informed care, it's ethical and it's relational. And even the American Academy of Pediatrics back in 2021, they issued two papers simultaneously. One was the clinical background, right, talking about trauma and pediatric medical traumatic stress within pediatric settings. And then the parallel paper was a recommendation, was a policy statement that trauma-informed care should be integrated across all pediatric service lines. And surprise, neonatology is a subspecialty of pediatrics. And when you think about first do no harm, the ethos of healthcare professionals across all disciplines, understanding that the experience that individuals endure is traumatizing, it becomes incumbent on me to do whatever I can to ameliorate that, to manage that, at the very least to acknowledge it in order to stay aligned with my moral integrity and my ethical responsibility. So, as I share this, then I want you to kind of see some of the nuts and bolts around what this idea is of trauma-informed care, according to Mary Coughlin, okay? So again, I mentioned that this had its roots in behavioral health, and the approach there was more of kind kind of after the fact, okay? So in behavioral health, many individuals, and what we know now is the majority of people that have psychopathological conditions, they have their roots in early life adversity. It's important for us to understand that human beings have an incredible capacity to adapt to situations. But in the moment adaptations actually can become maladaptive over time. And when we don't look at these early life experiences through a trauma lens, we allow for this kind of deranged developmental trajectory to go on unchecked. Earlier papers and research, again, sponsored and supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics, talks about this eco-biodevelopmental framework, that the ecology of the developing individual, right, both physical and emotional and relational, influences the biology. And so remember, I touched upon that, right? Epigenetic, HPA axis activation, autonomic nervous system regulation, mitochondrial failure, all of these phenomena and more are influenced. But again, we have this built-in mechanism to survive. And so many of these people, they are surviving their lives, that they are not thriving. And so the thing that was really interesting to me was, again, looking at trauma-informed care through the behavioral lens, which was more reactive or responsive. Once kind of adopted within neonatology, it really becomes a preventative approach. If I understand now that maternal separation and unmanaged pain and aggressive feeding practices and the paucity of relational engagement with patients and families can actually have a deleterious effect. I know this now. So now I step in and I address those gaps so that I'm, plugging those up and preventing the sequela that is a consequence of these gaps in their developmental needs. And that becomes, trauma-informed developmental care. But there are principles around this, right? There are, kind of pillars of what does it mean to be trauma informed. And they're all grounded in biology and neurobiology in particular, if you kind of go back to that brain slide that I shared with you. So what I did on this slide is I underlined the principles of trauma-informed care, and then the non-underlined are the core measures. And I'm going to take you through all of those things, okay? So safety first, okay? Whether that is physical safety, psychological safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, safety is paramount, right? Remember the brainstem. One of the components that can confer safety is a sense of trust and transparency. Now, I have talked to a lot of my medical colleagues, and I think, what was the expression that this one colleague used? Like an existential crisis around trust in medicine. That oftentimes we think, hey, I got a stethoscope around my neck, and I've got about 80 million alphabet soup letters after my name on my name badge. Of course you can trust me. And as trustworthy as you believe you are, and I'm not disputing that, you are still a stranger to this other person who is meeting you within the context of absolute trauma, absolute fear. Their precious brand new baby is at the precipice of life and death. And they're going to listen to you, and you want them to trust you. Trust is earned. And you need to relate to these individuals, help them regulate, help them feel empowered. Just like anybody, you would want the same thing. If anybody on this webinar has ever had an experience where a loved one, has required hospital care, how did you feel about those relationships? How did you feel about safety? How did you feel about trust and transparency? These are core principles that need to be upheld. And listen, I get it. We're going to trip up. We're not perfect. We're human. So what happens when you falter? You own up to it. And it's those owning up to it that then, begin to build the trust and the transparency. I'm going to have you jump over to the left side on that bottom left-hand corner. Healthy relationships and interactions. Think about the limbic system on my brain slide, right? I have to feel seen. I have to feel safe. I have to feel like you get it, or at least you're listening to me for real. Not just nodding your head, but you're for real listening. Healthy relationships and interactions. And what's cool is that this also reinforces the preceding principle, right? If we have a healthy relationship and I feel that you're respecting me and you're listening to me, that builds my trust of you. And that makes me feel more safe. Empowerment, voice and choice, kind of coming up that left pedal side there. You have to give me a sense of agency, because at the end of the day, if I'm talking as a parent, this is my baby. I'm taking this little person home. You need to help me be the best parent I can be, the best grandparent I can be, the best caretaker I can be. You need to listen to me, because if you don't, that's not a good relationship, and I don't really trust you. And if I don't trust you, I don't feel safe. And then finally, equity, anti-bias efforts, and cultural and gender affirmation. I need you to see me for me and respect me for me. It doesn't matter if you don't like how I live my life and anything else about it. In these moments of professional interaction, you absolutely positively have to be respectful and have to embrace who I am in those moments of care. And how do we do these, right? How do we operationalize these principles? Because it's one thing for me to just regurgitate them, right? It's a whole other kettle of fish to actually walk the talk. And so I'm going to speak to you now a little bit like a nurse, because I feel like, well, I don't feel like it, it's a fact. Nurses, do the bulk of the work, right? I mean, we are the person that is 24 hours, 7 days a week at that bedside. Without nurses, there is no hospital care. And so there are different routines and practices that I perform on a regular basis that offer touch points for me to operationalize my presence, my intentionality, my compassion through these different measures. So if you come over to the right side of the pedals, and you see that top one that says healing environment, it's the space. And it would be grand if everybody had like a top line brand new NICU, but we don't, okay? But that doesn't mean that it's not a healing space. The healing space is the physical, the human, and the organizational. That's what creates a healing space. And our presence, our compassion can actually overcome maybe some of the shortfalls of the physical space. I know people oftentimes go, oh, that's light, sound, and space. Yes, it is. But it's also being compassionate and caring and having a healthy team dynamic that includes the parents as part of that team. And it's working in a system that supports us to do the good work that we're called to do in consistently reliable ways. Daily activities, or in nursing, we call them activities of daily living. And that's posture and play. Those are meal times and nourishment. Those are skincare practices and hygiene. I mean, at the end of the day, these are parenting activities, but when parents are not able to be present, they fall to me as the nurse. I'm going to help you reposition you so that you can be comfortable. You've been laying on this side too long. I'm going to now roll you over to this other side. But it's not like, moving a lamp from one end of the table to the next table. This is a human being I'm interacting with. So I get to operationalize my trauma-informed principles and my intention and my compassion through how I engage with you in the bed, how I reposition you, how I change your diaper, how I give you a bath, how I support a feeding encounter, a mealtime encounter, right? These are all relational touch points that give me the opportunity to show you, I love you. You're not alone. And we're going to navigate this together. If you jump over to the left side now, we've got protected sleep and then the pain and stress. Protected sleep, that's really getting to know the sleep-wake cycle of the baby. What I've learned is that just because the baby's eyes are closed doesn't mean that person is asleep. And I also know that just because you're supposed to be done up at 8 o'clock, that it's not okay for me to just barge right into your space and start flipping and stripping you, which is what I traditionally would do. You're 8-11-2-5, that's my time to do you up. We need to get out of that mindset. This isn't a fellow human being. And I get it. We have schedules, medications need to be administered at certain times. But if we could just put the brakes on our checklist a little bit and show up a little more human, that actually would mitigate a lot of the compounded stress and trauma that these individuals endure. There was a really interesting study it was a secondary analysis of some polysomnographics data around, sleep-wake states in newborns in the NICU. And what they found is that when babies when their sleep was disrupted because it was time for a do-up, it actually induced bradycardia apnea, hypopnea, and oxygen desaturations. Now, if I rewind the tape a little bit and I say first do no harm, and you're going in and flipping and stripping them without any intention or assessment of their sleep-wake state, you're doing harm. So again, slowing down, being more intentional and respectful of who this little human being is and is to become. Managing pain and stress. Not everything needs a pharmacological intervention, but we do a lot of painful things. And there is a ridiculous overflowing body of research that tells us the effectiveness of skin to skin care, sweet solutions, of facilitated tucking, all these non-pharm strategies to manage the pain and stress that goes along with a lot of the procedural stuff we do, from heel stick to IV puncture to feeding tube insertion to lumbar puncture, to intubation. None of these, outside of a life-threatening situation, no procedure should be progressed without some type of pharm and or non-pharm intervention. I got to work with this hospital up in Aberdeen, Scotland, and they started this really cool initiative after we kind of went through a lot of this education around trauma-informed care, and they called it It Takes Two, that absolutely no procedure is performed unless there are two people present. One is the procedure doer, and the other person is the support person or the comfort person. And they had such an incredible improvement in babies, distress signals, nuisance alarms, and what was even cooler was satisfaction. Satisfaction with the comforting person, who the gold standard would always be the parent, but if they weren't present, it would be a nurse or a therapist or something like that, or a physician, depending on what the procedure was. And then the procedure doer. They just felt so much more connected to the humanity of the work that we're called to do as healers. And the last core measure down here at bottom right corner pocket, compassionate collaboration. That's really about compassionate collaborative relationships. That's about really intentionally making it part of the plan to see each other, to collaborate with each other, to respect each other, to promote self-efficacy, that I got this feeling, which is kind of like empowerment on steroids almost, in a good way, right? It's the emotional well-being of everybody. Not every NICU has a psychologist, although they should. And so in the absence of having that, and even with psychologists, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm so sorry, you're having an emotional breakdown. Let me call somebody because I'm not trained to do this. You're not trained to be a human being. You're not trained to be loving and compassionate. I'm not buying it. It can feel uncomfortable, and we need to intentionally educate and support skill building. All of what I'm sharing with you, from intention to presence to compassion, these are all skills that can be learned, and it becomes incumbent on us to teach them, to role model them, to mentor them consistently and reliably. And so I'm going to now transition you over. So this is a lot of stuff. And there are a lot of moving parts. You know why? Because we're human beings, and human beings are messy, just like life. And so there's lots of different elements that we need to use in our toolbox that helps us provide reassurance and comfort to another person. And that reassurance and comfort, for me, is mediated by what I now call the B.U.F.F.E.R framework. So the American Academy partnered with this other organization, and I'm blanking on them right now, and I apologize. But they would talk about, like, what is trauma-informed care? The trauma-informed care, or being trauma-informed, it's not about summing up the suffering. Because with that mindset, it's like, oh, gee whiz, I'm so sorry, you've just had too many. Good luck on your life. It's not that at all. It's about building the buffering. We are not defined by our trauma. We have traumatic experiences, but we also have opportunities to cultivate resilience and even post-traumatic growth. And we do that not through, take 2 cookies and call me in the morning. We do that through our relational healing. And for me, I believe that that begins with B.U.F.F.E.R. So it's about belonging, understanding, forgiveness, frameworks, equanimity, and respect. And so what I'm going to do for the next several slides is just take you through each one of them, offer you a prompt of reflection to really begin to internalize this. Because even though words are flying out of my mouth, unless this stuff sits in your heart and settles in, nothing will change. And we need things to change. We know that the healthcare system that is currently in operation here in the US and beyond is not meeting the human needs. We're awesome at the diagnoses, and we're pretty darn good at the interventions and the medical management. But all of these things are happening around a human being whose needs are not being met, who's frightened and overwhelmed and feeling isolated. And we're right there next to them. So it's like a perfect opportunity for us to lean in and really walk the talk of what it is to be a healthcare professional, what it is to be a healer. And that word, I've shared this word and this lingo with many colleagues, and sometimes it's like, oh, that doesn't really fit. It needs to fit. Try it on. Wear it for a little bit a day, right? And over time, you will begin to see yourself as a healer. And that healer that you desire to aspire to will also heal yourself. This strategy that I'm sharing with you, when you can actually operationalize it and walk the talk of it, it actually fills up your cup. It actually reduces your vulnerability to burnout. It can actually enhance staff retention. It can actually promote recruitment. It can do a lot of really, really cool things. But it is about consistency, and it is about sustainability. And that begins with us deciding, you know what, this is what I want in my environment. This is what I want to help create. So the B is all about belonging. We all, babies, families, you, me, my Aunt Betty, everybody needs to feel like they belong. That's how I thrive. And that's how I have meaning and purpose in life. And so, one little practice tip is just greeting families by their name and acknowledging their presence, inviting them into the rounds, sitting down next to them and giving them an update. And I know you're all saying, oh my gosh, Mary, I don't have enough time. Make the time for crying out loud. You use those things as an excuse. I did. I get it. But what we really need to do is figure out how we can begin to chip away at this system that does not address the humanity of those that it encases. A quick sidebar. So my youngest grandson and my youngest daughter, who is the mother of my youngest grandson, had a NICU experience. He had a surgical situation, and then he had complications afterwards and needed a second NICU experience. And one of the things that she shared with me was how much it made her crazy that nobody called her by her name. Everybody called her mom. And again, as I say this, I'm not saying that calling a mom is a bad thing, because some moms want to be called mom. But my daughter felt that they called her mom, and we were there for a while because they didn't know her name, and they didn't even bother to take the time to ask her name. And in that small choice, she felt unseen. She felt unsafe. She felt disconnected from what was happening. So I'm going to ask you just, in a moment, or just take a second. When have you felt deeply that you belonged? What were the circumstances? What was the situation? Who were the people? Did they say or do anything that helped you feel like you deeply belonged? Use the answer to that as a little, touch of wisdom, as a touchstone. Well, this made me feel like I belong. I wonder if I could, replicate that or use a similar strategy to help this individual feel like they belong here, at least in this one moment. That's the other piece of this. I think sometimes, you want it all done yesterday, and we want to be a trauma-informed NICU right now. It begins with that first baby step. And then you build on that. And it can be frustrating. Trust me, I've been talking about this for now almost 13 years, right? I thought it would be a done deal. But again, it just speaks to the challenges, right, of human change and all of the confounders that can disrupt our good intentions to address the needs of those that we care for. And I know that we love those that we care for. We just need systems to better support us to do the good work that we want to do. Understanding. I need you to understand where I'm coming from. I need you to understand that, yes, I'm terrified that my baby's going to die, and I've got 3 other kids at home, and I don't have childcare, and I was able to navigate somebody coming over, but I don't know what I'm going to do, and I'm freaking out. Empathy is more than an emotion. It really is a skill. I know some people say, oh yeah, no, he'll never do that, or she can't be that way. Get curious about that, because oftentimes those are adaptations that have become maladaptive over time. If you get a chance, you need to check out this YouTube video. I'm sidebarring again, by Laura Vandernoot Lipsky, Beyond the Cliff. It's an amazing video. It's 19 minutes long, and it will give you so much insight and wisdom. We need to be there for these families, not just from a technical perspective, but from an empathic perspective. And I get it. We've got competing priorities. Maybe I can't, I'm the nurse practitioner, and I've got an admission over here that I need to attend to, and this mother is falling apart at the seams. Either I tag someone else to go do the admission, or maybe I call a colleague over and say, hey, have you met this person? I know you're really out of sorts. I really need to get over there, but let's work this out here. Just tell it like it is. Be normal. Be a human being. And those actions not only foster safety, but they build trust. They're parts of a healthy relationship, and they can really mitigate the extraneous trauma that we are superimposing on these families in a situation that we can't take it away. We can only make it a little bit less overwhelming by our actions. So asking what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. Remember, I mentioned that before. And, what has helped you feel understood? Again, tapping into your inner wisdom. Trust me, it is such a cool little tool in your toolkit. How would I feel in this situation? Actually, I have a situation just like this, and this is what worked for me. Modify, or even suggest it, and then have a conversation with the person. If this isn't going to work, what else would work? What else could we do? It's a partnership. That's what understanding is all about. The forgiveness piece, right? So some days I just don't show up as my best self. And it's not because I didn't have a second cup of coffee. We all have lives too. We all have our own stories as well. And whether you like it or not, that stuff is in your DNA too. It's in your epigenome. And there are different situations, different personalities, different phenomena that might trigger you in being maybe even re-traumatized, or at least being annoyed and trying to, this was my strategy. My trauma strategy was just shove it all down, pretend it doesn't exist, and just show up nice and clean and squeaky. Good luck to that, okay? It doesn't work. You can sustain it for a while, but it doesn't work. And it comes out over time. We need to be able to forgive ourselves for those times when maybe I was short with the parent. Maybe I was short with a colleague. Maybe I was a little bit too quick with the baby. Don't dismiss it. When you dismiss it, it's really disrespectful to the person who was on the other end of that experience. Acknowledge it and say, you know what, I'm really sorry about that. And you don't even have to give an explanation. I'm really sorry. Can we, start over again, or whatever the right thing is. But that's a skill. That's hard to do. And we need to practice these things. Because at least from my perspective, I was taught, hold all that stuff back. When you show up, you need to be that sterile, technically proficient, wicked smart person. And all that other stuff, leave it at the door. Well, what I learned over time is when I just show up as that one thin strand of who I am, I'm not strong enough to handle all the complexity and all the overwhelm and all the suffering that I'm bearing witness to. And it increases my vulnerability to burnout. If I can bring all of myself with me, the good, bad, and the ugly, and know here I'm in a professional space, but all of this rich story and experience is there as a foundation for me to show up fully smart, fully technically proficient, but more importantly, fully human. Forgiveness for ourselves, for each other, and for families. We are in their worst nightmare. And you just think about when you're in your worst nightmare. Are you showing up as your best self? No. These families are dealing with overwhelming adversity. In addition to the fact that their baby is in a life and death situation. You may think that they're not in a life and death situation because you've been working in a NICU for 30 years and, he's just a feeder grower right now. But to them, to the parents, This is a completely abnormal, overwhelming, terrifying experience. And it is a nightmare, sometimes even when they go home. And so having the compassion that when parents come to us and maybe they're frustrated, maybe they're yelling, maybe they're being mean, we need to look at their behavior through a trauma lens. You're not taking up that much space in their head or their life. It's their trauma that's there, and you need to help see through it. See them, understand them, give them the space and grace that they need to discharge some of that. Hey, you know what? I feel your frustration. I feel your anger. Let's go sit down. Let's talk. Let's do whatever is the right thing to do. But the thing not to do is go, well, I'm going to report you and you're never going to come in here anymore. I'm going to call the security because I don't need to deal with that kind of stuff. We're creating more turmoil than is necessary because we've stepped so far away from our humanity. We need to practice forgiveness. We need to normalize the emotional dysregulation and uncertainty in the environment for others, for the families, for the babies, for our colleagues, and for ourselves. We need to do these emotional debriefs and check-ins, not just if we have the time, because if it's only if you have the time, what you're saying is this is not important and go deal with your own stuff. I'm going to stuff it down because I still have some space down here in my baby toe. We need to really think about what it is that we're doing and role model our understanding. And again, this is not about perfection. This is about being present in the moments. Think about, for this reflection, what might you need to forgive yourself in your role? And I've had to do a lot of forgiving. And it's okay because what I have learned has helped me become a better clinician, a better educator, and more importantly, a better human being. Frameworks. We work in an evidence-based environment, an evidence-based specialty. Frameworks are wicked important. Frameworks help create safety. They create predictability. They give the team, a shared language and shared accountability. And then we partner with the parents in that. And we have this common language. It's really, really important for us. Because as you know, right, so-and-so told the parents this on Friday night, and now it's the weekend, and the weekend people are shifting everything all around. Right? That's not a framework. That's not predictability. That's not safety. That's not trust, not just between the parent, but between our teammates too. And I get it. Things happen and sometimes it can be scary, but those are opportunities that inform us that we need to build and bridge our relationships, that compassionate collaborative relationship core measure. What framework or clinical or whether it's clinical or cultural helps you stay grounded in the chaos? Because NICUs can be incredibly chaotic places for clinicians. Imagine how chaotic they must appear to parents and families. It's about building equanimity, that ability to find calm in the chaos. And it doesn't just happen because I put on my stethoscope, I went over the threshold, and now I'm Miss Calm. No, it's something that we have to practice over time. Oops, I'm sorry. I think my little thing went over there. It's an inner calm that we practice over time and we improve, right? Just like going to the gym builds your muscles. The more you do this, the more you're able to retreat to that place. It's about creating micro moments of equanimity within ourselves, regulating our stress response, so that we can show up and have that tough conversation and be prepared for the emotional fallout with compassion, with grace and space to allow what's going to unfold. And it doesn't mean that we're locking up, and we're retreating from our emotions. It's required to share your emotions, right? And to be compassionate with others. One of my best grounding rituals is just taking that deep breath. Intentionally, not just like, oh, I'm breathing, right? But all right, I'm going to do this. And set an intention. And that might work for me, but maybe you go, you know what, I'm going to just run up and down the stairs once, and then I'll be right back and I'm ready to rock and roll. Whatever helps you get that sense of balance and togetherness. And so the homework for this is what is it? Discover what it is, what works for you, so that you can pop that in your tool kit intentionally, not by surprise, but, oh, I know what'll work for that situation, right? And again, as you discover more and more about yourself, you can use the wisdom that you're uncovering about yourself to guide how you will help another person navigate very similar situations. And at the end of the day, the last letter is respect, that you are respectful in tone, in presence, and how you respond to situations. And this is not a surprise. You won't nail it every time. Sometimes you're going to flub it. Sometimes you might come up gruff. Guess what? We're operationalizing the buffer framework here. So you can forgive yourself. Go take a deep breath or run up and down the stairs and come back and go, I'm really sorry about that. You know what? Let's start again. Babies and families can feel when they're seen. They can feel when they are being respected. And they can equally feel when they're not being respected. I love this practice tip, narrating what you're doing during care to the babies and the families. Hey, little Joey, we're going to change your diaper and I'm just going to listen to your lungs. Is that okay? And warm that stethoscope and just gently put it on as you're talking to him, as you're engaging. Yes, this is an evidence-based intervention. They talk about multimodal sensory stimulation is calming to the nervous system. And it's also being wicked respectful of this individual as a fellow human being. So really kind of, checking in. What does respect look like and sound like when I'm providing care? And the thing that's cool about once you start noticing, once you start raising your awareness, you notice it more, which opens the door to more opportunities for you to operationalize it and practice it. And then gradually over time, knowing how brains work, right? It gets embedded into our default mode network. Yes, part of the connectome of our central nervous system. So all of this stuff works and it's all evidence-based. And as we start to do that individually and then gradually in pairs and teams and units, system change starts with us. And we can be more intentional about it. I always love to look at this integration of trauma-informed care as the best, most perfect, probably shouldn't use the word perfect, but quality improvement initiative. And everybody benefits. The babies benefit, the families benefit, and we benefit. And we feel good about the good work that we're doing. And that keeps us there, doing the good work, being healers, helping people navigate and not just survive their NICU experience, but hopefully thrive and flourish beyond it. Culture shifts through micro practices, not by big grand gestures that start up at the C-suite, but by us at the front line, making compassion scalable. If I can love me in this moment, I think I can love you too, even though you make me cuckoo house, right? But I have to practice that. I have to build my compassion, fill up my cup so I can show up prepared. Maya Angelou has this really cool video that she does where she talks about being a rainbow in someone else's clouds. And she talks about the intentionality about that. It doesn't just happen. You have to prepare yourself to be that rainbow. I mean, sometimes it happens and you don't even realize it. But how cool would it be if you did realize it? If you set an intention and you were awake and aware to what was unfolding, you could make you could be a rainbow in a lot more clouds. So I'm coming down to the close here. And I want you to just kind of reflect now on what part of the buffer feels most needed in your unit. And it could be a couple, but just from your perspective. And then maybe you, with intentionality, just start practicing that, practicing it with yourself, and then just show up and be that dimension of the buffer. Never underestimate the power of role modeling. And based on everything that I've shared with you today, I would love for you to just think a little bit about what will you do differently? I mean, we could say next week, or we could say, how about your next shift? Think about these things. These are not on a checklist. These are, I mean, if you like the checklist metaphor, they're checklists, but they're in your heart and soul. And they're the ones that matter the most. You can train anybody to do vital signs. You can train anybody to be the pick queen. You can train anybody to do all of these tasks that we do. And now we've got AI. And AI can do a heck of a lot of the things. But you know what AI can't do? Can't do? AI can't show up to your bedside and hold your hand and make you feel seen and safe as you're navigating the worst nightmare of your life. Only you can do that. We are not just providers of care. We are weavers of wholeness. We are greater than the sum of our parts. These little people that we get to serve, they're not just a 23-weeker or a diaphragmatic hernia. They are the hopes and dreams of their family. They are a full human being who deserve our intention, our presence, and our respect. Thank you so very much for sharing your time with me today. These QR codes here, they're resources that I've created. This Heart and of Healing Toolkit's like a little reflection guide. The TIDC and the B.U.F.F.E.R is an infographic that takes you through each level of the B.U.F.F.E.R again, if you want to check it out. And then as an executive member of the Family Centered Care Task Force, if you're interested, it's absolutely free. It's a global organization of wicked smart people and clinicians just like you, all trying to move the needle closer to zero separation and authentic partnerships with parents. So thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Mary, for that really informative and super insightful presentation. We
Thank you.
hope that those of you watching also found the presentation valuable and found some key pieces to take away. Thank you to Chiesi, whose partnership makes this microlearning series possible. Chiesi is a global biopharmaceutical company committed to developing and commercializing innovative therapeutic solutions in respiratory health, rare diseases, and specialty care. The company's mission is to improve people's quality of life and act responsibly toward both the community and the environment. Once again, this presentation is worth one continuing education credit for NICU nurses. Scan the QR code or click the link on your screen to claim your continuing education credits. Thank you again for your time. We hope you enjoyed this series and hope that you can take what you've learned and apply it in your roles in the NICU. Thank you, everyone.